Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear participants. Welcome to this session of Self-Improvement to the Quran series. So, this is the third part of the passage that we had started to study 2 days ago. This passage, as you would remember, was from Surah Bani Isra'il, the 17th Surah. And as I had pointed out, that this is perhaps the most comprehensive passage in the Quran which can refer to the moral message of the Quran. We can call it the moral message of the Quran, but because you will not find a more comprehensive passage at one place in the Quran which deals with these commandments. And in fact, they can be rightly classified as the 10 commandments of the Quran, and you'll find that they are exactly 10 in number, the positive commandments, similar to the ones which were given in the Old Testament to Moses by the Almighty. So these are the 10 commandments of the Quran, and they all relate to morality. And as we shall see at the end of this passage, that the Quran itself has referred to the fact that this is from among the divine wisdom which we have been taught. So today's verses are from 33 to 38, and as I said, this will end this session or this passage on the Quran. Regarding this surah. So it starts off with وَلَا تَقْتُلُوا النَّفْسَ الَّتِي حَرَّمَ اللَّهُ إِلَّا بِالْحَقِّ فَمَنْ قُتِلَ مَظْلُومًا فَقَدْ جَعَلْنَا لِوَلِيِّهِ سُلْطَانًا فَلَا يُسْرِفْ فِي الْقَتْلِ إِنَّهُ كَانَ مَنْصُورًا. Do not wrongfully kill any person whose life has been held sacred by God. And remember, he who is slain unjustly, we have given his heirs the authority. Then he should not exceed limits in killing because he has been helped. So the first directive in this passage, as you can see, is wrongfully killing any person. And of course, when we say wrongfully, this would mean that there is absolutely no justification. The only justification of killing a person which has been mentioned elsewhere in the Quran is either that person spreads anarchy in the land, or he is himself guilty of killing someone. And this authority too is delegated to the authorities, to the state. No one can take one's life individually. However, Surah Bani Isra'il being a Meccan surah, and in those times Mecca was still a tribal society, so therefore people were allowed to take revenge of their own selves, and they have been actually admonished that they must not exceed this, فَلَا يُسْرِفْ فِي الْقَتْلِ, which means that they should not go beyond killing the person who killed, who was guilty of killing, and not end up killing other people as well. And as was the case in those times, that if one person would be killed, then in lieu of that one life, the opponents would take the lives of many people. So it is precisely for this reason the Quran has said that although you have been given this authority to take qisas, in the absence of a government, in the absence of any system, and being a tribal society in Mecca, of course, this is something that can be done. But as we can see later on, it was in Medina when the state was established, and ever since that establishment of state, now this authority rests with the state. No one can individually take the law in his hands, and the state authorities will have to intervene in all such things. And a single person is not given this prerogative in any way. Otherwise, it will become a law of jungle, and everyone will start killing other people. So as far as exacting qisas is concerned, or retaliation is concerned, it has its basis and its origin after the establishment of the society of the state in Medina, and ever since that to present times with the Islamic State, or with the rulers of the state. So the next thing which is mentioned here is وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا مَالَ الْيَتِيمِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ حَتَّى يَبْلُغَ أَشُدَّهُ. And then it is said that then he should not exceed the limits in killing because he has been helped. Of course, this is the part of the last verse. Do not even go near the wealth of an orphan, because except in a goodly way, until he reaches maturity. So the other thing which is now mentioned is that we have to protect the rights of the orphans. And of course, the guardians of the orphans, they are told that they must not tamper with the wealth of the orphans who have been given in their custody. And if they're looking after them, then they should do so in a very, very careful way. Of course, if they have to personally benefit from the service that they're providing them, it has to be in a very calculated way, and they must not go beyond the limits. And the other thing which is mentioned here is that once they reach mature age, then they should hand over their wealth to the orphans. And again, this is one of the things which the Quran has mentioned at several places, and this is one of the features of all divine books. In fact, even non-divine books which talk of morality, they lay great stress on all those elements in the society who are underprotected, who are underprivileged, who are vulnerable. So orphans being the most vulnerable, they are especially mentioned in the Quran at a number of places. And here the heirs or the guardians of the orphans are actually mentioned specifically, and they are told that they must not in any way tamper with the wealth of the orphans who are given in their custody. And then the next part says, وَأَوْفُوا بِالْأَحْدِ إِنَّ الْأَحْدَ كَانَ مَسْئُولًا. And keep your promises, because you shall be held accountable for promises. This again is something which is very important, and it goes without saying that giving one's word is so important that, to honor one's word when we give one's word is so important that we at times seldom realize that whenever we make a commitment at that particular time, either we have to be very careful in making that commitment because we should be in a position to honor that commitment. Otherwise, it's always good to say a polite no, and by saying that, well, it's not possible for me to make that commitment, that's always better to do instead of making a commitment and right at the time that we are making that commitment, we might be knowing that we might not be able to honor it. So giving our word, making our commitment, this is something which has to be honored in every respect. In fact, the Almighty has called this covenant, our religion with God, our commitment to God, as a covenant. So when the whole religion has been called misak, and misak is something which is used often in the Quran, which means a covenant, which is something of an agreement which is made between human beings and their Lord. So they have to abide by it. So the whole religion itself is a promise that we have made with the Almighty to abide by it in letter and in spirit. And of course, وَأَوْفُوا بِالْكَيْلِ إِذَا كِلْتُمْ وَزِنُوا بِالْقِسْطَاسِ الْمُسْتَقِيمِ ذَلِكَ خَيْرٌ وَأَحْسَنُ تَأْوِيلًا. Give full measure when you measure, and weigh with correct scales. This is better and fairer as far as the consequences are concerned. So one thing which has been pointed out here, of course, was something which actually inflicted. It was this inaccuracy in weighing, in measuring, was a whole nation was inflicted by it. We know the nation of Shu'aib, radhiyallahu anhum, and sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was the person who was sent to his nation, and they were the ones who would be weighing dishonestly, they would be measuring dishonestly, and this had become a lifestyle. And being traders, the Arabs also are now cautioned that they must not in any way breach this conduct when they are weighing and when they are measuring. Remember, this is something of a commitment they are making to the other person. So if they are exacting barter or exacting money in lieu of it, then they have to give in full measure. Any amount of dishonesty would amount to embezzlement. It would be a fraud. It would be deceiving others. And this is something which is totally unacceptable. And this goes without saying, dear viewers, that it is here that all of us need to be absolutely very, very careful in selling and buying products. And when we are selling our products, as this whole directive would tell us, that we must also not hide the defects of whatever we are selling. In fact, they should be made evident to the buyer. It's like when you're not exposing the defects of the thing that you are selling, then you are actually not asking for the right price. And in other words, you are weighing or measuring. The spirit of weighing and measuring incorrectly is found in this directive also. When you sell something and that thing has a defect in it. So it's something that we have to be careful about. And then the Quran says, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْأَبْصَارَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. Do not go after what you know not, because eyes, ears, and heart, all of them, they shall be held accountable. They shall be questioned. So, la taqfu ma laysa laka bihi ilm. So there are so many things that we just cannot have access to, and we make tall claims about them. We make statements about them. We give our own view about them without even knowing even a small detail about them. So we are cautioned here that things which are beyond our grasp, things which we have no knowledge of, we must not in any way express our opinion about them. In fact, we should not even go after such things which are beyond our grasp. And we have to remember that eyes, ears, and heart, all of them shall be held accountable, which of course means that whatever we hear, whatever we see, and whatever we think, especially the heart here is instrument of thinking, is mentioned here as an instrument of thinking. And when we say instrument of thinking, of course, it does not refer to the thoughts that come to our mind, but to the thoughts that we actually adopt and we start to pursue about such things. We have to understand that, well, coming of a thought is one thing, and then going on to pursue that thought is another thing. So will be questioned about that. Our eyes, our ears will be questioned about what we have been seeing and what we have been hearing. So it's not an easy life to live, and precisely it seems because of this reason that this life of the world has been likened to a very sharp edged wire which is stretched across hell, and it's like something which is very symbolically mentioned in certain narratives. So it's not an easy life if you have to live according to our conscience, if you have to always speak the truth, if you have to abide by the truth, if you have to side by the truth, and if you have to lead a life in which you think that your eyes, ears, and your heart shall be questioned and they shall be held accountable for what they have done. ولا تمشي في الأرض مرحا إنك لن تخرق الأرض ولن تبلغ الجبال طولا. And do not walk arrogantly on the earth, because neither can you split apart the earth, nor can you reach the height of the mountains. So one of the things that we have been cautioned with in the Quran at many instances, including this instance, is that we should not show that arrogance and conceit and pride. And one of the foremost manifestations of this pride is the gait, our style of walking. We must not walk, and we must not use a gait which smacks of arrogance, which speaks of arrogance. And the Quran says that however much you might walk, you just cannot lan takhriq al-arda, you cannot split apart the earth. Walan tablugh al-jibala, nor can you reach the height of the mountains, which means that your gait is not something which is going to make you superior to other people. You're not going to reach the heights of the mountain, nor can you split apart the earth with your weight. You are what you are, and we must always pose as what we are. And if we pose as someone who is beyond what we actually are, then we are showing this arrogance. And arrogance is, dear viewers, something which the Almighty does not like at all. And we know that this is something that we also don't like. So arrogance has to be abstained from. And then finally it says, Kullu zalika kana sayyuhu inda rabbika makruha. The evil of each of these things to your Lord is very displeasing. And as the verse clearly states, that arrogance is something which is totally unacceptable to God. And in fact, it refers to the previous directives as well, that when you weigh and measure less, when you are not abiding by your limits in protecting the orphans, when you are not fulfilling the word that you gave to other people, when human life is at stake and human life is in danger because of you, the evil of all these things is something which is very known to God, and it is despicable. So these are some of the directives, dear viewers, that we have studied. And if you connect what we have studied today with the previous two passages, because this is one composite passage, we will realize how efficiently the Quran tells us that as far as morality is concerned, as far as our behavior and conduct is concerned, it comprises some very, very fine details. And most of these details are already found in our own intuition, in our own conscience. So what the Quran generally does is that it reminds us of these details. It tells us that as far as these facts are concerned, they are nothing new to us. we know the evil of all these things. It's only that we tend to forget them, they elude us, and so we have to constantly remind ourselves not to lose sight of them. And this is precisely what the Quran does. So this brings us to an end to this passage that we have studied in the last 3 days. Inshallah, we'll be studying a new passage tomorrow. And now we can open the questions and open the questions for the audience.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Shehzad. Dr. Shehzad, I have a couple of written questions for you today. My first question comes on the subject of zakat, and they do not live in an Islamic country. And they ask, my salary is 60K per month, and I belong to a well-off family. Do I have to pay 10% on gross as zakat or deduce exemptions? Are there exemptions on produce or not? If exemptions are there, who would decide the exemption in our country, because they don't live in an Islamic country?
Right. So the exemptions which the Prophet has actually given, they can be taken, they can be accounted for. But for a salary of 60K, if I heard you correctly, 60K per month, these exemptions would be easily crossed. So once you have the amount which crosses the nisab, which is of course not the exemption, then you have to pay zakat on the whole amount. So on 60K, you'll have to pay 6K, and it will be on gross. And on the other hand, the taxes that you give to the government, even if you're living in a non-Muslim government, you can subtract those taxes from your zakat liability, because for the very reasons that you give zakat to an Islamic state, to run that Islamic state, to cater for the needs of the whole state as well as the needy, it is precisely for these reasons that you give tax to your country that you're living in. So you calculate your zakat separately, which is 10% of your gross income, and you calculate the taxes that you give. You give whenever you give them. You give yearly. You give them at times on the bills that you pay. There are property taxes. There are income taxes. There are wealth tax. We have sales tax. So all these taxes can be added up, and they can be subtracted from the zakat, which is now incumbent upon you as a result of earning 60K per month.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Another question that we have is from a philanthropic nature, and it comes as a result of yesterday's lecture. And they ask, I have experienced that when I help very old and ailing women who are mothers of our house help ladies, I give them clothes, but their clothes are taken away by their daughters or daughters-in-law, and they are found wearing the same old clothes. So they want to make sure how they actually can help the very old people when they want to help them, and they don't want their help to be snatched away by their own family.
Well, this is something which, we as people who would like to help the people who are underprivileged, we can do little except that maybe we can take a commitment from them that, well, this is something that we are giving for your use, and don't end up giving to your daughters or your nieces or other women around. I think this is a personal settlement that you might make with the person that you're helping, and tell that woman that you are helping her personally, and you would like her to wear whatever you're giving. And in case there are other deserving relatives around her, then maybe sometime you can also help them. But I think the only thing that we can do is make them realize that this is something that we are doing for you, and we would like you to use it. So, so you see, the only possibility is that either they give it away willingly or out of their own choice to their other relatives, or the other relatives are so strong enough that they just take them away or maybe snatch them. So, you need to find out what exactly is going on and what's happening. And it's just a question of managing this whole thing.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. Now, Baran Nashur, you may have your question now.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam.
My question is about, as a student, I have to take a student loan. And in my country, for the longest time, there was no interest you had to pay after you were finishing studying. But now they decided that you have to pay a small amount of interest on the student loan. But I've already built up quite some debt. Let me say it like that. So what should I do right now?
I mean, you mean that you have to pay student loan, pay back that loan with interest.
Yes.
So you see, this is a liability that you have, and slowly and surely, I'm sure this would be a long-term loan. So normally, student loans, they are very long-term, and they understand that once you start earning, you'll start paying it back. So that is what you should plan for. That once you are through with your studies and when you start earning, you'll pay a portion of the borrowed amount, and also you'll pay back the interest which is now levied upon you.
Yeah, but does this mean that I am sinning because I'm paying back the interest, which is prohibited by the Quran?
So you see, as long as interest dealings are, they are prevalent in the country, paying interest is never a sin. It was never a sin in the times of the Prophet, in the times of the Quran. Only once the whole issue of interest had been outlawed or was just eradicated from the society, was paying and charging interest regarded as a sin. So once this happens, of course, you'll not need to do that. But as long as interest is still there, so paying interest is not a sin at all. It's charging of interest which is a sin. So in the whole of the Quran, you'll find that it's nowhere mentioned, because you see what you're doing is you are overstretching, you are in fact burdening your own self, you are a target of this oppression. So you need not feel guilty in any way. If you're giving interest, it's not you who is sinning. It's basically people who are charging interest who would be taken into account.
Okay, and I have one more small question, if I may. We all know that if you pass wind or let out a fart, your wudu breaks. But if you're in the middle of prayer and you have the feeling you have to pass some wind, but you're trying to suppress it, but you have the feeling some might got out, or you're doubting some got out, what should one do?
Just ignore that feeling. I mean, if you are not sure, then you don't need to, just get yourself entangled in that doubt, because then you start thinking of what is happening instead of concentrating on the prayer. Just give it a moment of thought that has something happened or not. And if you think that it's just a question that has arisen in your mind, just ignore it. And unless you have some concrete evidence, I mean, if you think that, there is something has happened, and if you feel that in a dominant way that something has happened, only then maybe you can do that. Otherwise, just continue with the prayer.
Thank you. Nashaba Wasim, you may ask your question now.
Assalamu alaikum, sir. So my question is, like, my husband, he has his own company and he's working as a consulting. There is no other labor in his company. So which category we have to pay the zakah? In 10% or 5%? Like, he has to manage his company with the company and everything.
So you see, this is a ruling that I can only give if I have more details. Otherwise, I think all that you need to tell him is that if he is spending capital and he's also using his skill and his labor, I would say, in any way, if both of them are involved, then he has to pay 5%. Otherwise, if one of them is there, it's 10%. I think, unless I know more details, I cannot comment. But what you can tell him is this principle, and he can decide for himself as well.
He is a software engineer, so he has worked consulting, but he has his own company. But just because of the consulting, he has his company, so he need to be managed by the accountant and everything.
So this means that he has invested money and he has also invested in his labor. This is what seems to me. I mean, I will still need to have more details, but if both of these things are being employed, then it's 5%.
Okay, thank you, sir. So can you repeat the rule? Like, what you say? Like, what's the rule?
The rule is that if capital and labor, I mean, if skill, you can say, and your investment both are working to produce something. On the one, you are using your skill and you're using labor, and also investing money, and then both these factors of production are being used. In that case, it will be 5%. And if one of them is absent, then it would be 10%.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Tariq Javed, you may have your question now.
Yes, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Sir, about the 10 commandments which you call, If I rank, I would like to say that the measuring of the item that we sell is one of the most commonly existing social evils, especially in our Pakistani society.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so rampant that we are like designated as one of the worst countries in terms of
Mm.
food quality
Right.
controls and quality
Mm-hmm.
control. So, what could be like the blueprint of what we can do individually, or what the government should do to get rid of this deeply existing problems?
I think the only thing that perhaps we can do is start with the younger generation. Of course, we have to start with ourselves also. I mean, it comes with self-realization. As soon as we realize that we are doing something wrong, we should try to immediately amend that wrong. But other than that, instead of making big plans, I think it's best to start off with your own household, teach your young ones, your children, your grandchildren, to teach them morality, teach them the value of truth, to teach them uprightness. So it's basically also becoming a role model for them. I mean, these are such basic issues that you don't need any argument or reasoning to convince people. This is what we should do because it's something that our conscience tells us. So I think that starting off with our own selves, with our own families, with our immediate circle of friends, this is the area that we should work on, and leave big plans to governments. I mean, because you see, governments will have their own priorities unless they ask you for some suggestion, in which case again my suggestion would be to groom the next generation in the schools that the government might be running in a way that moral training and moral teaching occupies the highest priority in the early schooling years, and similarly hiring teachers who have this upright personality so that they can become role models. So you see, these suggestions can always be given to governments, but needless to say that most governments, they are busy in so many other things that education and morality seldom becomes their priority. So I would say that we should concentrate more on our own selves, concentrate on our own surroundings, and be role models. Try to be role models as far as we can for the people who look up to us.
Yeah, exactly. I think you have analyzed very correctly that the governments are busy doing many other things which they think is good for them. And the best thing to do is to concentrate on what improvement we individually we can do or within our own families. Yeah, that's a
Mhm.
good idea. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad. I have another written question, and the question is after they earlier asked you the question about the incident of Cave of Hira. They say that they feel very heartbroken when they found that the incident of Hira is not as they had believed in since their childhood, with immense pride in their in our holy prophet, peace be upon him. Besides, finding of the incident of Isra wal Miraj also as a dream and not as a physical experience has actually made their faith deeply bruised. Something that they felt they have related with Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam as the greatest ever mu'jiza given to him appears to be not the way they earlier believed to be. So they would seek your guidance about it, what they're feeling. How should it
So
be?
you see, first of all, we have to understand that our affiliation to our religion is should not be through our emotions. It has to be through reasoning and rationality. If something is not proven from the Quran or from the Hadith, and we have been accepting it because our parents have been telling this and they have been going on for centuries, it's not reason enough for us to get bruised or becoming heartbroken at all. Because you see, for us, the quest for the truth is the real thing, and to us, the truth is something that we have to value. It's not that we are stuck at one place and we think that whatever we have been taught since our childhood is something that we have to adhere to. This is not the correct approach. The correct approach is that we have to always seek the truth and always critically evaluate things that have become I mean, common, that we think that they are as true as the Quran. So, I mean, a believer and a person who is after the truth should always relish when something new comes his way or her way. Of course, it has to be sound and established on the basis of reason. But then this is what we are. I mean, this is what our life should be. It's not that we have to uh, get stuck or we fixated at certain concepts that we have been told since our childhood. No, it's a quest for what right and wrong are. So when we find something, we should immediately change our stance as long as if we get convinced. So I mean, there's nothing to feel heartbroken about, because you see, a person can only be heartbroken if he is so fixated or she is so fixated to a certain idea that you think that it is as eternal and as certain as the Quran itself. So you remember, these are all human constructs, these are all human interpretations, and if they are proven wrong through a strong string of reasoning, then that should prevail. So we have to teach ourselves and keep on teaching this to ourselves, that our affiliation to religious concepts is not through emotions, but through the reasoning a certain thing has.
Bisma Tirmizi, you may ask your question now.
Dr. Saleem, Assalamu alaikum. My question to you is, when you travel to Western countries or even to Eastern countries, we realize that the morality of the people, their ethics, their humility, their kindness, their honesty, their civic sense, their honesty, everything is exactly how Islam preaches. They don't need to be monitored to make sure that they're being honest. They don't need to be monitored to be sure if they have a civic sense. Whereas when you go to a lot of Muslim countries, more particularly our own, you see that there is no civic sense, there's no cleanliness, the morality is, all over the place, people are corrupt. So I mean, not that I'm any judge, to judge people, but my question is, it almost seems that the principle of Islam applies, these people adhere to it and we don't. So how do it's like that, are the Muslims going through the same thing that the Jewish people were going through, the Bani Isra'il, when they were neglected by God and God was so angry with them that he said that, I'm going to now have a new nation? How are we supposed to interpret it and, perceive things? I don't know if I've been able to explain myself.
Yes, I mean, this is something something which is very palpable. We all see this all around us. And the reason for this, especially in Muslim countries, is because of our ritual-centric understanding of religion. So you see, religion is taught to us as a tradition in which basically you have to pray, fast, go for Hajj or Umrah. And it is not taught as a system of living in which morality and personality development and high moral conduct also figure. So you see, we have this ritual-centric approach towards religion in which all stress is laid upon these rituals. And you'll find people being very punctual in their prayers, very punctual in fasting and giving their charity, but they will be, not good human beings, because you see, religion has not been taught to them in a way which addresses these human qualities as well. So this is because of a deficient form of teaching, and this is going on ever since. So I think we need to set right this, and we have to tell people that not only rituals, but it's also the fact that you have to understand that rituals themselves are not an end, they are a means to an end, and that end is to become a good person. So if your prayers and your fasting and your Hajj and Umrahs, they are not making you a better person, then there's something wrong in, because you think that they are an end in themselves, whereas the Quran tells us they are a means to an end, and that end is to become a good person, to become a good practicing Muslim and a good thorough human being. So if our worship rituals are not transforming our lives, then we have to check them, because you see, as I said, we think that they are an objective in themselves. And the second thing that I'd like to tell you or maybe share with you is that, remember, other people, especially followers of Abrahamic faiths, like the Jews and the Christians, and the better part of the world is the Christian also. Remember, they are the Ummah of Jesus, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he himself is a mighty prophet of God. So if they are adhering to morality, it's not that we are just the custodians of Islam. Islam is a religion for humankind. It's a religion for whole mankind. So if some part of mankind, again, as through the agency of God's prophet, is following morality and good conduct, so we have to see that it's not just that we are, obligated to follow Islam. They are as much obligated to follow Islam as well. In fact, a correct way to put them would be that they are sects of Islam. You remember, Muslim is the word which Abraham chose for his progeny, and Jews, Christians, Muslims, all are his progeny. So if one part of progeny, I can see two extremes. One extreme is ritual centric, and the other extreme is moral centric. In their lives, you'll find rituals have almost vanished. In Muslims and believers or followers of Islam, you'll find that morality is almost vanished. So remember, it is something of an amalgam of both. It's as much as rituals, as much as morality and good conduct. So I think this is a package that we have forgotten.
I agree with you, Dr. Saleem, but then when you, like, my reference was also to a place like Japan, though they follow Buddhism and Shintoism, but I, they seem almost Muslim in the way they conduct themselves as human beings. So that is something that
Right.
really confused me, you know. So, but I agree with you and I hear you. So, you know, that was
You
maybe
see,
for them.
yes, I do understand. If you look at our eastern neighbors like Japan, even China, you'll find that they have a very rigorous moral training system. I have studied some part of their system, and I've seen that the teachings of Confucius. There's a book called Analytics, which almost every Chinese student is made to go through, and that book is about a 150-page book. You'll find its translation on the internet, also in the English language and many other languages. It's nothing but the teaching of morality. Similarly, in Japan, in some of the other Eastern countries as well, Korea, Vietnam, etc., you'll find that their moral training is taken up through activity-based learning subjects, in which they teach morality through activity-based learning. And this is something which has made them a very powerful and strong nation. Remember how they had been rubbed in the First and Second World Wars, but they rose after that. And one of the reasons for this rise is because of their strong inclination towards morality and to scientific advancement as well.
Thank you so much. Appreciate that answer.
Thank you. Baran Mishur, you may ask your question now. This will be the last question of the day.
Sir, I had one more question because regarding the Dajjal and the end of times, because we know that Dajjal only comes through the hadiths, and there's a lot of details that are not very clear about Dajjal. I just wanted to ask some clarification on what do we actually know about Dajjal and the end of times?
So see, if you, regarding aspects which are discussed in Hadith and not in the Quran, one of the very cardinal principles in interpreting Hadith narratives is to gather all narratives of the same topic. So if you gather all narratives and collate all narratives which mention Dajjal, we will come to know that, I mean, the word Dajjal is actually just half the word of the total expression. So the total word or the expression which has been mentioned in Hadith literature is Al-Masihud Dajjal, which means a false Messiah or an Antichrist. So what will happen, it seems, is that because the Jews are also waiting for their Messiah, for them he never turned up. The Christians are waiting for the return of Jesus, and Muslims are also returning for the return of Jesus. So it seems that near the end of time, taking advantage of this tradition that all these three Abrahamic religions are waiting for a Messiah, someone will claim to be that he is the Messiah, but he'll be a false Messiah because he will be Dajjal. The whole expression is Al-Masihud Dajjal, which means a deceiver, a Messiah who is a deceiver, I mean a false Messiah. So taking advantage of these three traditions, that because all these three Abrahamic groups believe that there is going to be some Messiah coming in later in time. So a person taking advantage of this belief would claim that he is that Messiah, whereas he would be telling a lie. He would be a false Messiah. So this is mentioned as one of the signs of the Day of Judgment. So near the end of time, this is what we think will happen, that a person will claim to be Jesus or to be the Messiah, whereas he would be fooling these three traditions.
Thank you, Dr. Shehzad, for an amazing lecture for today and the answers to the question. Thank you. We'll see each other tomorrow.
Okay. Inshallah.